Darren had never expected to be in this position. Just a few weeks ago, he was an ordinary diplomat, working in the bustling halls of Earth's political center. But now, standing on the vast space station orbiting the distant star of Volta 3, everything felt surreal. The station wasn't just a hub for trade. It was a meeting point for various species from across the galaxy, each one as unique as the stars themselves. Today was different. Today, the most important event in the galaxy's calendar was happening, the Galactic Alliance Summit. It was the largest gathering of extraterrestrial leaders in history, and Darren, at just 28, was representing Earth. He had trained for this moment, but now that he was actually here, standing in the grand hall of the station, his heart raced. His suit was pressed to perfection, and his demeanor was calm, yet inwardly, he was unsure of what to expect. The world of aliens, advanced technology, and distant stars felt overwhelming. He could only hope that Earth's voice would be heard among these ancient and powerful beings. As the gala began, the ambassadors and diplomats from different species gathered in groups, some with their own entourages, others with more subtle presence. The air buzzed with conversation and a sense of urgency. Everyone knew how much was riding on this summit. This was no ordinary meeting. This was the chance to form lasting alliances, to secure trade agreements, to solidify peace across vast stretches of space. Darren's task was clear: represent Earth with dignity, build relationships, and most importantly, try to make a connection with the leaders of the other species. He wasn't the highest-ranking official from Earth, but he had been chosen for his ability to navigate difficult conversations. And today, his task would be to make a strong impression on the most important leader of all, the Princess Elira of the Althran Empire. The Althrans were a majestic race, known for their beauty and intelligence. Princess Elira, the heir to the throne, was as enigmatic as she was powerful. Stories about her and her people were whispered across the station. They were an ancient species, said to possess secrets of the universe itself. Some believed they could control time. Others spoke of their ability to manipulate energy in ways no one else could. Darren didn't know much about these abilities, but he had heard that the Althrans had always been one of Earth's closest allies, before everything changed. The alliance between their people had fractured long ago, and the details were buried deep in the archives. What he did know was that Princess Elira was a figurehead of immense importance. Darren had prepared himself for this moment. Over the past few days, he'd learned as much as he could about Althran culture, history, and traditions. He knew their customs were rich in symbolism, particularly when it came to gift-giving. Offering a gift to someone in the Althran court wasn't just an act of kindness. It was an exchange of power, a statement of trust, or a way to establish a bond. A simple gesture could carry the weight of centuries of history. It was with this in mind that Darren decided on his gift, a handcrafted pendant made from a rare crystal found only on Earth. The crystal, known as the Ether Stone, was known to have a calming effect. It was said to symbolize peace and unity, something Darren hoped would resonate with Princess Elira, especially considering the fractured history between their peoples. As the evening progressed, Darren found himself making his way toward the Althran delegation. Princess Elira stood at the center, surrounded by her advisors and attendants. She was tall, her presence commanding, yet graceful. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, and her violet eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. She wore an elegant gown made of a material that shimmered as though it had been woven from stardust itself. Darren paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He wasn't sure how the princess would receive him, but he had to try. He approached, bowing slightly in respect. The others in the room seemed to fade away as he focused on her. "Princess Elira," he said, his voice steady but respectful, "I come on behalf of Earth with a humble gift." He extended the pendant in his hand, offering it to her. Elira's gaze shifted from her attendants to the pendant. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment Darren couldn't read her expression. She reached out, taking the pendant delicately in her hand, as if sensing its significance before even touching it. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that gifts were serious business, but no one could have predicted what happened next. Elira's hand trembled as she held the pendant. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her violet eyes began to glisten, and Darren's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't crying, but there was something unmistakable in her expression, emotion, raw and vulnerable. For a moment, she seemed as if she were lost in a memory, far away from the glittering hall around her. Without warning, a single tear escaped her eye and trailed down her cheek. The gasps from the crowd were audible, and Darren froze in place. This was not the reaction he had expected. Elira was a symbol of strength and grace, someone who had always commanded control of her emotions. Yet here she was, crying in front of everyone. For a brief moment, the room felt colder, as though the very air had shifted. No one moved. Darren, unsure of what to do, stood frozen, his gift still extended in his hand, unsure whether to take it back or step forward. Finally, Elira blinked, as if coming back from a deep, distant place. She quickly wiped away the tear and gave Darren a small, polite smile, but it did nothing to ease the tension in the room. "I thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. This means more than you can know." She placed the pendant around her neck, her fingers lingering on it for just a moment longer than necessary. Darren wasn't sure whether to say something or stay silent. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened. He had known the gift was special, but it seemed like there was something more to it, something much deeper. Why had it caused such a strong emotional reaction from her? He was sure that the pendant hadn't been of any great historical significance to her, at least, not that he had been told. Before he could ask, one of the senior Althrin ambassadors, an older man with a long, flowing beard, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable as he glanced at the princess and then turned his gaze to Darren. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for Darren to hear. Darren blinked, caught off guard by the statement. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice faltering slightly. The ambassador didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply nodded toward the princess, who stood with her back turned to Darren. Elira remained still, but Darren could see her shoulders stiffen. There was something in her posture, something defensive. It was as though the very act of receiving the gift had triggered a response she hadn't anticipated. The ambassador cleared his throat, his gaze lingering on Darren for a moment before he spoke again. "You've stirred something ancient in her heart, something that hasn't been felt in centuries." Darren's confusion deepened, and he felt an uneasy tension rising in his chest. "What do you mean? The gift? It's just a pendant." The ambassador's eyes darkened, his lips pressing into a thin line. "The pendant is not just a gift. It's a relic of a long-lost connection between your people and the Althrin Empire." He paused, as if weighing his words. "And by giving it to her, you've reawakened something powerful, something that shouldn't have been disturbed." Darren's heart began to pound in his chest as he struggled to understand what was happening. What had he truly given Elira? Was the pendant more than just an Earth artifact? And why had it caused such a reaction from her, one so strong that it had left her in tears? As the ambassador turned to leave, he paused and glanced back at Darren. "Be careful. What you've awakened could change everything." Darren stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind. As he looked back toward Elira, he couldn't help but feel that he had just stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The crowd began to move again, and the party resumed as if nothing had happened, but Darren knew that nothing would ever be the same. The princess's tears, the ambassador's warning, the mystery of the pendant, everything was connected, and now Darren was caught in the web of it all. The only question now was, what was he going to do about it? Darren could barely sleep that night. The events of the gala replayed in his mind like a broken record. Elira's tear, the ambassador's cryptic words, nothing made sense. He had expected the gift to be a simple gesture of peace, a diplomatic offering to a foreign princess. But what had happened instead? He had felt a connection, but it was one he hadn't anticipated, one he didn't fully understand. The next day, Darren was summoned to meet with Elira in private. He had been told by a member of her staff that she wanted to speak with him about the incident. His heart raced as he walked through the long corridors of the station, the walls lined with advanced technology and alien designs that he still struggled to comprehend. When he reached her private chambers, the door opened without a sound. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and Elira stood near a large window, gazing out at the stars. She didn't turn when he entered. Instead, she continued to look out at the galaxy, her posture graceful but distant. Darren hesitated at the doorway, unsure of what to do. He hadn't been prepared for this, but after a moment he stepped inside and bowed slightly. "Princess Elira," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady, "I hope I'm not intruding." Elira turned slowly, her violet eyes meeting his. There was a gentleness to her expression, but also something more, something he couldn't place. She nodded slightly, gesturing for him to approach. "You're not intruding, Darren," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "In fact, I'm glad you've come." Darren felt a wave of relief wash over him. Her demeanor, though serious, wasn't cold. But the more he looked at her, the more he realized how much of her remained hidden behind that composed exterior. "I wanted to speak with you about the gift," she continued, her fingers lightly brushing the pendant still hanging from her neck. The crystal seemed to glow softly, catching the light. "It's more than just a pendant, isn't it?" Darren swallowed, his throat dry. He had suspected there was more to the gift than he had known, but hearing Elira acknowledge it made the mystery feel even larger. I didn't mean to cause any distress," he said carefully, his voice almost a whisper. "I thought it would be a gesture of peace, a simple offering." Elira took a deep breath, looking down at the pendant as though lost in thought. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost melancholic. "You couldn't have known," she said, her gaze drifting away from the pendant. "The pendant you gave me, it's not just a symbol of peace. It's tied to something ancient, something lost to time." Darren's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean? What is it tied to?" Elira's eyes met his again, and this time her gaze seemed to pierce through him. It was as if she were weighing her words carefully, deciding how much to reveal. "Long ago," she began, "Earth and the Althran Empire were not just allies. We were united in a way few would ever understand. Our people shared knowledge, culture, and even bloodlines through a deep connection that spanned galaxies. The pendant you gave me, this ether stone, was once a symbol of that bond." Darren blinked, trying to absorb the magnitude of her words. "I didn't know," he said softly, still processing what she had just said. "I had no idea the pendant meant so much." "It wasn't just the pendant," Elira continued. "It was a promise between our peoples that was broken. Thousands of years ago, a war shattered the peace between our worlds, and the memories of our alliance were erased from history. The pendant you gave me, it was lost during that time, hidden away, forgotten." Darren took a step closer. "So you're saying that Earth and Althran were once connected, in a way that no one remembers?" Elira nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Yes. But over the centuries, that connection was deliberately buried. My ancestors feared that if the truth ever came to light, it would undo everything they had built. So they erased the history of our bond with Earth and turned their backs on the past." Darren's mind raced. He had come to the station thinking he was merely representing Earth in a political negotiation. Now, he was discovering that his own planet's history was entwined with the very people he had thought of as distant and mysterious. "But why?" he asked. "Why erase the past? Why hide this from you?" Elira's eyes clouded with a sadness Darren couldn't fully understand. Because the truth is dangerous. The Althran Empire has built its power on the belief that they are superior, better than all other species. And if the truth were to come out, if people knew that the Althrans and Earth had once been equals, it would shake the foundation of everything. It would show that we were not always the rulers of the galaxy, and that our dominance was built on lies. Darren felt a wave of sympathy for her, but also a deep anger. The knowledge that his people had been erased from history, hidden away, made his blood boil. How could such a powerful connection be so easily discarded? And you, Darren said, his voice steady, you've never known this. Your own history, your people have kept this from you. Elira's gaze softened, and she nodded, though there was pain in her eyes. I was born into a world that believed the lies. My education, my upbringing, all of it was designed to keep me in the dark about the truth. Until now. Darren's mind was spinning. The pendant he had given her wasn't just a gift. It was the key to unlocking a past that had been hidden away for far too long. And now somehow he had triggered something. But the more he learned, the more he realized just how dangerous this knowledge was. So what happens now? He asked, his voice firm with resolve. Now that you know the truth, what do we do with this? Elira was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with uncertainty. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to bring everything to light, to restore the bond between Earth and the Althran Empire. But the other part of me fears what will happen if I do. My people, they won't accept it. There are those in the court who would rather see Earth remain in the dark. They've built their power on our isolation from the galaxy, and they'll do anything to protect it. Darren's heart sank. He could feel the weight of her words, the burden of the truth that had been revealed. But he knew one thing for certain. They couldn't let this go. They couldn't let the past remain buried. There has to be a way, Darren said, his voice stronger now. We can't just sit back and let them hide the truth. We need to make it known. We need to restore the connection between our peoples. Elira's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since they had met, Darren saw a fire in her gaze, a fire he hadn't known existed. You're right. But it won't be easy. There are forces at play here that I can't control, people who will stop at nothing to keep the truth from coming out. Darren felt a surge of determination. Then we fight. Together, we'll expose the lies. We'll make sure that Earth's place in the galaxy is restored, no matter the cost. Elira studied him for a moment as if searching for any sign of doubt, but all she saw in his eyes was conviction. She nodded slowly. Together, she whispered. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of the decision they had just made. Darren felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He wasn't just representing Earth anymore. He was part of something much larger, something that could change the course of history. As the moment lingered, a knock came at the door. Elira's expression hardened and she straightened. Darren turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a tall, imposing man dressed in dark robes. He was an advisor, one of the highest-ranking members of Elira's court. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Princess," the advisor said coldly, his eyes flicking briefly to Darren. "But it's time." Elira's gaze remained steady, but Darren could see the tension in her posture. She nodded once, and without another word, the advisor stepped back, leaving the door slightly ajar. "Time for what?" Darren asked, his voice laced with confusion. Elira didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at him, her expression filled with uncertainty and resolve. Time to make a choice. Darren's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew this was only the beginning.